McDonald, John McMullen here with you on Birds 365. On schedule release day, we've got a couple of early leaks. We know 3 of the 17 games that the Eagles will be playing
Well,
this
not
year.
officially. I mean, I think
You're not trusting Mama Kelsey. You think she was giving bad info.
I think she's got a good handle on it, but I can't say officially is all I'm saying.
That's fair. Right. Doesn't have the NFL seal of approval on it yet, but Mama Kelsey's got her own seal of approval. And if I were a wagering man, I would bet that the Eagles and the Chiefs play week number 2, just like Mama Kelsey says. But you're right. It's not official. We do have 2 official dates. That would be the Eagles and the Giants on Christmas, 4/25. Sorry, Johnny Mac. And then week 13, the 49ers coming to Philadelphia for an NFC championship game rematch at 4/25. Sorry, Johnny Mac. But we've got a whole bunch of games.
I already knew this was coming, Jody. By the way, your team is relevant. Monday Night Football, September 11th, New York Jets hosting Buffalo. Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen. So that's the first week of Monday Night Football. I'm sure they'll have a double header, I believe, on the first.
Yeah, you said they're going to be upwards of 3 double.
Well, one's Christmas. I mean, Christmas is on a Monday, and they're going to have 3 games. I believe on Christmas. Don't quote me on that, but I believe they're having 3 games on Christmas. And then you have the opener, and I think there's going to be one more. And then I was just saying Peter Schrager had Mike North, who's one of the NFL schedule makers, on his podcast. And he said, expect a lot of Chiefs, which we already know. We see Jets, Cowboys, Eagles, and more Bears in prime time than you'd expect. So people are betting on Justin Fields. So we already knew. I mean, you're going to see a lot of Eagles in those primetime windows.
Right, which primetime's primetime, and most everybody's definition of primetime means night games. But truth be told, for the NFL scheduling, the late afternoon, late for us, because again, East Coast and Birds 365, we've got some West Coast listeners, or at least they act like them as 49er fans here on our stream. We always think of things in terms of the time zone that we're sitting in at that time. 4:25 is considered a late afternoon game. Well, on the West Coast, that's a 1:25 game, but it is usually the biggest individual draw. If you had all the games in that are on at the same time, Sunday afternoon outdoes both Sunday night and Monday night. So the NFL's definition of prime time could differ, could vary a little bit from what John Q. Public puts out there. That late Sunday national game is as important as the quote-unquote night games that the NFL puts up, even though some people may not think about it. And, yeah, I think we've got 2 official games on the books for the Eagles as far as the schedule goes, and both of them are late afternoon games, which for me is as important and as big a game as any of the night games. So, yeah, John, I don't think you're going to get near as many 1 o'clock starts as you would like.
No, well, that I knew that coming in. That's baked in, but it is what it is. I mean, they're a good team and they're a popular team. So, yeah, I mean, the Jets, and we've already seen the Jets, how things can quickly shift with Aaron Rodgers. Detroit, people are kind of betting on now. Mike North says Chicago. So they're seeing that shift from Minnesota and Green Bay in the NFC North. So I asked Mike, I was, tongue in cheek, because I think it's absurd, but Detroit week 1. What do you think of that, Jody McDonald?
All right. Do we have any Detroit Lion fans here on our stream? I'll check them off. No problem whatsoever. I think the NFL's line of thinking behind that one is, do they play the Lions this year? Does Kansas City play? They play the Vikings this year. If the Viking game is in Minnesota, then they couldn't have gone there. But if the Viking game was in Kansas City, I guess they could have gone there. I think they decided to pick a team that Patrick Mahomes could put 50 on. And oh, by the way, that Lion defense was pretty damn bad last year. And we saw
They got CJ
Eagles.
now.
CJ could get burnt by Patrick Mahomes in week number 1 too. They didn't want to go with the rematch of the Super Bowl, so give us a good matchup we can sink our teeth into. Lions, an up-and-coming team playing for a playoff spot last week of the season, just came up short because of the outcome of the other games. By the way, let's have a team that Kansas City can go wild against on offense. We'll put in a team there with a questionable, if not suspect, defense. And
now it's interesting because they're plugged into the NFC North. Green Bay and Minnesota are away games. Chicago, Detroit are home games. Mike North just talked about Chicago, as I mentioned. Why not Chicago? Chicago's the bigger market.
Their defense is quite. That whole division's defense is questionable, to be truthful with you.
Yeah.
So they could have gone Chicago. Fields against Mahomes.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah. Young versus, and that's a big market, obviously, Chicago.
Right, but here's the reason why. Here's the reason why they couldn't go. And you and I know that things happen during an offseason, like the team that drafted first against the team that drafted last. Yeah, no, they weren't going to do that. That just sniffs too much of a mismatch of week number 1. You can't have the first team against the 32nd team as your kickoff the season game.
Yeah,
at least the Lions were right there battling for a playoff spot.
That's a bad look. That's definitely a bad look. One of my early predictions, the Chiefs are going 4-0 versus that division. An early prediction.
You're going out on a limb on that one,
yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
I'd share that with
now. Patrick Mahomes might get hurt, but if he's there, they're going to go 4-0.
All right, later on this afternoon, or is it morning? What time are the coordinators supposed to speak as of now, John? Or am I asking you way too early?
Yeah, 12:45-ish.
Okay, so they have at least given you a general vicinity of when.
I assume it'll be a little bit late, but if you want to watch it, be in front of your computer, wherever you watch press conferences at 12:45-ish.
All right, so here is, again, speculatory question, as Mike Sealski so well put when he was on with us. It's kind of what we do. We have to talk about something that hasn't happened yet. We need to speculate ahead of time in advance, and we don't always love doing it, and sometimes we beg off doing it. But if you're not willing to do it at all, then you should not be in the business that we're in. We're going to hear from Sean Desai as the new Eagles defense coordinator and Williams as their new offensive coordinator. When Nick Sirianni was hired as a head coach, I remember where I was. I was in my car. I had to take my wife to a doctor's appointment, and I was sitting in the car listening. She went inside and said, listen, the coach is going to be, I got to hear what he's got to say here, even though I was rolling a tape on the television presentation. But I wanted to hear it live for the first time. And we'll all admit, the coach seemed a little bit nervous. He seemed a little bit overmatched. He seemed like he was not ready for his first ever media availability here in Philadelphia. And shoot, I was fielding calls 2 days later on WIP. They need to fire this guy. Let's get out in front of it. He can't be the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles.
They need to fire this.
Oh, John McMullen, I took those calls. Hey, I know it's going to be a bad look, but they need to get themselves another head coach. This guy's a bumbling idiot. I took those calls. And now we know Nick Sirianni is a Super Bowl coach within 2 years, and he handles himself very well in his public speaking appearances. There's a chance that the two new Eagle coordinators don't come off as being in grasp of the situation today. And there will be second guessers if they don't like the answers and or the way they present their answers. If that's the case for one of the two today, which one do you think is more likely?
I mean, they've both done it before. Sean's done it in Chicago. I just talked about Chicago. I mean, Chicago's not a walk in the park. Brian's done it at the college level. He's more used to us. He's already talking to us. I don't think you're going to see a catastrophic Sirianni like
No, I'm this is pure
dropping of the
speculation
ball.
on my part. I'm not asking you to say it's going to happen. I'm telling you ahead of time.
I guess
If it
Brian.
happens for one of them, which one do you think it would be more likely?
I guess Brian, because college isn't the pros, and there's going to be more. It's a lot of student reporters. It's not as um, who aren't willing to ask certain questions. You've seen many college coaches bully young reporters over the years. That's a little bit more difficult to do at the pro level. So I guess from that standpoint, I would. Sean's already done it, like I said, in Chicago. It was a short period,
right. But then again, didn't Nick do it in Indianapolis before he came here? And he was the
yeah, that's
coordinator,
fair
so he
point.
spoke to the media,
Fair
and then
point.
he kind of fumbled
I
his way
guess I'm
to his
putting
first press
more.
conference. When you're taking a step up into bigger shoes, there is a little pressure on you.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I'm putting more on Chicago than Indianapolis, but you know, here's the issue with the Eagles coordinators, and I think you saw this. More fans paying attention who watch these things saw it. Like they're very. This is Nick's team. He wants his coordinators on the same page. You didn't get a lot from Jonathan Gannon or Shane Steichen on the podium. We got much more off the podium. They're very structured. They want everybody on message. So they're going to have these guys on message, which is Nick Sirianni's message. And sometimes they can come across poorly because they're not really answering questions. Shane was here for 2 years. I don't think he answered one question on the podium that gave you any valuable information, literally, not one question. And he's tremendous off the podium, tremendous. So, perception sometimes is different than reality. So I lean towards the way the Eagles do things and they want everybody buttoned up. That might come across poorly.
And we've got an example of Jonathan Gannon when he's, again, made a move, stepped into bigger shoes, the pressure gets ratcheted up. I don't think he's done a very good job since he's taken over the Arizona head coaching job on the podium, off the
That's
podium.
why they
in
button
any way,
people
shape,
up,
or
by the
form.
way. That's a perfect example of why they button people up or try to button people up. Because once you start talking extemporaneously, sometimes stuff comes out you don't want to come out.
So just to prep the Eagle fans today, you're saying expect very little because that's just the Eagles' way of doing their business, which I'm not knocking or mocking. It's smart. The way the Eagles attempt to handle the flow of information is smart for them. It's less entertaining for us. It's less for us to sink our teeth into, but that's the way you run an organization. And in a year after they went to the Super Bowl, came this close to winning it, you can't really second guess it. You got to say, okay, this is the way we've got to get our Eagle information.
And I applaud, I'm a big fan of CEO coaches. Nick tries to control each part of this team. And part of that is because he doesn't want people pointing the fingers at other people. Like if something goes wrong, he wants you to point the finger at him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it should be. Now, didn't work because plenty of people pointed the fingers elsewhere. But that's what he wants. He wants people pointing the finger at him. And that's why he does the things the way he does the things that he does.
So even though Sean Desai is coming from outside the organization, the other offensive coordinator, of course, was here and was elevated to that position, Desai coming in from outside. You think that it'll stay the same in that the defensive coordinator will have a little bit more latitude to do it his way than the offensive coordinator because Nick Sirianni, offensive guy, very much included in the game planning leading up to game day, just maybe not calling the play each and every single play in and play out in the CEO status, Desai's going to have a lot more room to roam and do what he
Oh
wants.
yeah,
Defense,
I mean
right?
he's in charge of the defense. I mean Nick's a little bit, he'll recommend a tweak here and there if he doesn't like the way things are going. But for the most part, he's going to run the defense. He's going to be on his own. But when he's on the podium, he's going to be. And the Eagles have had plenty of time to prep him because he's been here forever already. And this is the first time he's going to talk to us. But on the field, yeah, I mean, that's his domain. Nick's not a defensive guy. He'll, give some thoughts. This is how the offense will attack you, things like that. But yeah, I mean, just like Jim Schwartz was to Doug Peterson and Jonathan Gannon was to Nick Sirianni. Those guys are the head coaches of the defense, basically.
Right. But the reason why I asked the question, and please, if I'm off base, tell me. I remember back, and you and I talking about it, that we didn't even know that this was the case, that Jonathan Gannon was hired to be the defensive coordinator before Nick Sirianni was hired to be the head coach. So even though Gannon and Sirianni certainly knew each other, it wasn't like, whoa, you're hiring my DC head of me. It was like, we got Jonathan Gannon, was probably Sirianni's response when he found out when he's getting the head coaching job that Gannon was going to be his defense coordinator. He's probably all smiles. But that's not standard operating procedure in the NFL. Usually you hire your head coach first, and then he is at least a collaborator, if not the driving force of putting his staff together. The Eagles did it different than most people do.
By the way, can I correct something there? Because the Eagles got very angry at that. So I got to correct the semantics of it. They did not hire Jonathan Gannon before they hired Nick Sirianni. They agreed to hire Jonathan Gannon before they agreed to hire Nick Sirianni. So,
thank you for covering your rear end, my rear end, the show's rear end, whatever, if the Eagles needed to be stated that way. What's the difference? They can get mad at me. All they want. That's fine. The Eagles decided. What's the word you used?
Agreed to term. Basically, what happened was, for people that don't know, the Eagles were very close to hiring Josh McDaniels as head coach. Again, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Jonathan, again, is very close to Josh McDaniels. They have a relationship, the John Carroll Mafia, I like to call it in the NFL. They're very close. Now, Jeffrey Lurie, I think, correctly, kind of surmised the situation. Josh McDaniels and Howie Roseman were, both on the same page saying, no, we'll get along. We can work together. And I think Jeffrey Lurie basically came to the conclusion, I don't care what they're saying today. Yeah. Ultimately, it's not going to work. And I think he's right.
So
I think
he's
100% right.
Yep.
And they went in a different direction, and we're going to keep interviewing guys until they found somebody they liked. They happened to interview Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni happened to have a relationship with Jonathan Gannon, so he had no issues whatsoever with Jonathan Gannon. Was on board, but yeah, he was going to be here as the defensive coordinator, no matter what.
All right, so here's the question I want to answer, and then we got John McMullen to join us to talk some Cowboys off season. 100% the decision that Sean Desai is the Eagles' defensive coordinator going into this season. Give me the breakdown percentage-wise of how that decision went.
100%. 100% Nick Sirianni. 100%.
That Howie Roseman had no say whatsoever. Or
Howie's role in that is he gathers candidates, and then it's up to Nick Sirianni to interview the candidates and make the decisions. 100% his decision.
Well, if Howie's gathering candidates, does he get 0% for that? If he only puts
because
coach, then the coach can't hire someone that Howie doesn't deliver to him.
Because you can't know everybody, right? You don't have a relationship with everybody. A lot of people he did.
Neither does Howie.
Kevin Patullo, No, but the point is you delegate. In other words, Nick's got a lot of stuff he's got to deal with. He doesn't necessarily want to spend all his time doing research on candidates, so he delegates that to the personnel department. Howie has done that in the past with certain guys, Brian Johnson being one of them. Found him at the college level. He's not binding him alone. A lot of people in the NFL knew about Brian Johnson. What he does is if Nick doesn't have a specific choice in mind, like say Kevin Patullo, he knew he wanted Kevin Patullo. No issues. He didn't need any help. Jamal Singleton's another one. Didn't have a prior relationship. Howie gathers a list of candidates, and then Nick Sirianni interviews the candidates and makes a decision on who he wants to hire. I don't put much stock in the gathering of the candidates other than I think Howie and the staff do a good job, but there's no pressing. Jeff Stoutland, they told Nick, look, you're keeping Jeff Stoutland. There are certain instances. And by the way, Nick is not upset by that today. So everything's a little bit different. But in the case of Sean Desai, he interviewed, he liked him. He wanted to keep the same philosophy, the same system, the same scheme. And it was his decision.
All right, good, because Jonathan Gannon, the Eagles had already agreed, not hired, not signed contract, but agreed to have him come in as the defensive coordinator. So in this case, if you're telling me it was that much more a decision by the head coach that he becomes their defensive coordinator, maybe he treats him the exact same way he does with Gannon, that he will be autonomous with the defense. I thought maybe if it was a collaborative decision by the organization, maybe Nick would be more involved on the defensive side. Sounds like that's not going to be the case. All right, we're going to talk offense and defense with our next guest. Did the Cowboys improve on both? Neither. Stayed the same during this offseason. They are the number one threat to the Eagles in the NFC East coming into the season. Cowboys and Eagles, always a fun conversation we're going to have with John McMullen next. He covers the boys day in and day out for The Athletic, and he's going to talk Cowboys offseason with us next.